Gurur Brahma, Gurur Vishnu, Gurur Devo Maheshwaraha, Gurureva Param Brahma, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Chinmayam Vyapyat Sarvam, Trilokyam Sacharacharam, Tatpadam Darshitam Yena, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Tvameva Mata cha Pita, Tvameva Bandhuscha Sakha, Tvameva Vidya Dravinam, Tvameva Sarvam Mama Deva Deva, Tvameva Sarvam Mama Deva Deva. Jai Guru. Om Sahana Bhavatu, Sahana Bhunaktu, Sahaviryam Karavavahai, Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. So, does anyone remember what verse we're on?
I have 137.
I have 136 is what we were going to start at, I thought.
Starting at 136?
Yeah.
And
I could be wrong, I don't know.
What section are we in?
35.
What's the title of the section?
Advice for Self-Control.
All right, that's right. So, would you help us out, please, Ganesh?
Niyamitam anasamum tvam swamatmanatmanam ayam hamiti sakshadvidhi buddhi prasadat janim marana tarangapara samsara sindhum pratara bhavakrutarthaha Brahma Rupena Samstaha. With a regulated mind and a purified intellect, realize your own self while in this body. Identify yourself with it and cross the shoreless ocean of samsara, whose waves are births and deaths.
I think we did this one last week, but just to review it. So, what are we endeavoring to accomplish with our discrimination, with our dispassion, with our detachment from the extroversion of the mind into the objects of the senses, letting go of all these various ideas of self, with the mind made very pure, very sattvic, with the radical reversal of the attentive faculty. See if you can notice, who am I? What is my essential nature? You see, it's vast and empty. It is that partless Brahman. And become identified with it It's something fundamentally different than the ego sense, the personal sense of self. This is the way to cross the ocean of samsara, to fulfill the purpose of life. Any thoughts or questions about this? Next one.
Atra anatmanya ahamiti matirbadha eshosya pusaha prapto jnana janana marana klesha sampata hetuhu yenaivayam vapuridam asat satyam ityatma buddhya pushpatyukshatyavati विषयैस्तनुभूतिः विषयैस्तन्तुभिः कोशकृद्वत्. Due to his ignorance, man identifies the self with not self. This is the bondage of man and brings in its wake the miseries of birth and death. Through this, he considers his perishable body as real. He identifies himself with it and nourishes, bathes, and preserves it with the help of sense objects. Thereby, he becomes bound like the silkworm in its cocoon, woven by its own threads.
So here Shankara clearly tells us what our bondage is. Due to spiritual ignorance, we identify with the perishable body, or the body plus the various parts of the subtle body. Where does this identification take place? It takes place in the subtle intellect. Once I begin to think I am my body, from it stem all the things. The first and foremost, I want to preserve that body because I think that body is me. And I have underlying everything the fear of death, the fear of change, and then all the treatment that the body receives, positive and negative, I become identified with it. If the body behaves in a way that's socially appropriate and other people like, I think I am a good fellow. If on the other hand, the body behaves in a way where I get criticism and condemnation, I think, oh, I'm a terrible person. And it is this identification of the self with the not self that is the cause of my bondage. The cause of that identification is the non-apprehension of my real nature. Most people out there in the world never think to investigate. Who am I? I just assume I'm my body. Everybody thinks that. And it's never examined. If I can be aware of it, if it's an object of cognition, there is a subject-object relationship. And I definitely am the knower of the body. So here is a very clear definition of what our bondage is. Any questions about this? All right, going on, next verse.
उत्तमस्तिस्तद्बुद्धिः प्रभवति विमूढस्य तमसा विवेकाभावद्वै स्फुरति भुजगे रज्जुधिषणा ततोऽनर्थव्रातो निपतति समादातुरधिकः ततो यो सद्ग्राहः स हि भवति बन्धः शृणु सखे. When one is overcome by ignorance, one mistakes a thing for what it is not. In the absence of discrimination, a snake is mistaken for a rope, and great danger befalls him who seizes it through this false notion. So listen,
Yes. Oh, I'm sorry I interrupted you. Go on.
So listen, my friend, it is mistaking the not self for the self, the unreal for the real that creates bondage.
So here he is introducing us into one of the most famous images that occurs in the literature, the snake and in the rope. And the idea is we do not see the rope. It is not available for experience. And what does my mind do? It projects some idea. It could be a water line. It could be a stick, or in this case, it's a snake. Because it's a snake, I'm fearful. How do I deal with the snake and the rope? I investigate. Find out what the substratum of the superimposition is. Now, I always like to use the snake and the rope as a metaphor for how some of us deal with our spiritual life. Oh, I've been meditating now for 30 years. The head of the snake has now turned into a rope. I'm advancing. Is that how it works? The snake is gradually turning into a rope. People who have this idea that I'm gradually getting more enlightened. Or some of the more destructive ones. I get out a baseball bat every morning and I beat on that snake so that it becomes a rope. That's those people who hate the body, flesh hating, I call it, who wallow in self-pity and low self-esteem, thinking that this is some form of humility. You either see the rope or you don't. It's like those puzzles you used to see in the Sunday funny papers. How many bunnies can you find in the picture? You either see the bunny or you don't. These optical illusion puzzles. So you either see who you are or you don't. There is a process in purifying the mind. Once the mind is pure enough, you either see who you are or you don't. Any thoughts about this? I think I forgot one of the images. 2 verses ago, did he use the silkworm as the metaphor? Is that the one where he does?
Yes.
I forgot to tell you about that. So this is Shankara's famous metaphor of how vasana works. So when the silkworm is spinning its cocoon, it has one thread. It's a very strong silkworm. It could just bust itself out with one thread. You and I, one vasana, little tapas, it's gone. Another thread, and then another thread, and then another thread. Vasana after vasana after vasana. And in time, spinning the silkworm is cocooned. So you and I, one vasana after another, millions of them over lifetimes. So our apprehension of the self is cocooned. I have this experience where I do not know who I am. Where is the locus of that? It's in the subtle intellect. The self actually is never really covered. The confusion happens in the mind. All right, skipping forward. Next verse.
Jim, I have a question.
Please.
So if the one self has no vasana and it's human birth that accrues vasanas, then the first generation of human births would have been born with 0 vasanas, and then our karma yoga impelled us to collect some impressions, I assume.
Well, who's to say that lizards and buzzards don't collect vasana?
Right.
You know, life doesn't start with being human. I can remember one camp where someone asked Swamiji about, well, what about murderers and rapists and violent people? Where do they come from, Swamiji? And he said, recent arrivals from the animal kingdom, which I thought was a very good answer.
So then I guess what I'm asking is, like, Genesis and Christianity explains where human birth and any animal came from. Does Vedanta have an explanation of how the one chose to birth itself in this multitude?
If today's activity is the result of yesterday's vasana, and yesterday's activity is the result of the day before, the question you're asking is, where was the first vasana?
Yeah.
That all comes from the Big Bang. This very moment was set in place at the very beginning of the Kalpa, the Big Bang. Then the cause and effect. The best way to explain it, way back when I was a kid, there was a TV show, black and white, believe it or not, called Disneyland. I don't even know if it's even on anymore in a modern form. But Uncle Walt Disney, was the host. And every Sunday night when it would happen, it would be, Tomorrowland or Adventureland or etc. And when he was doing Tomorrowland, which was always about science or something like that, he had a ping pong table. And it had a whole bunch of mouse traps on it. And on each one of the mouse traps was a ping pong ball. And what he was just demonstrating was a chain reaction. So he took one ping pong ball and he threw it onto the table, and it hit one mouse trap. And then all of a sudden there were 2 ping pong balls, and then there were 4 ping pong balls, and then there were 16 ping pong balls, and like popcorn. And that's kind of like the way it all started. In the beginning, there was the divine urge. The Sankhya's would say the disequilibrium of the 3 gunas. And from that, the whole Jagat comes, which then in the now includes you and me as equipments. Does that make it a little clearer?
Yeah, it's given me something to hold on to.
Can
But
I
the
ask a
thing-
question, Jim?
Well, let me finish with Deepa
Oh,
and then
sorry.
I'll get to you. The thing to understand is there is no negative force in this process. In Christianity, there's God, and then there's the nasty old devil. But in yoga, it just is, with all its permutations. So you've never made a mistake. You can't make a mistake. Part of this urge also means for human beings, we're all coming home to God. It's an inevitability. So take it easy. Don't worry. It's all going to work out. All right. Was that Justin who had another question?
Yes. When you talk about cause and effect and Big Bang and stuff like that, isn't there, wouldn't yoga kind of take it as like infinite Big Bangs backwards? Like it goes on to infinity backwards in cause and effect, and it goes on to infinity in the future in cause and effect?
Well, it's not infinity backwards. It's circular, according to,
Yeah.
to yoga.
But
So
it's like-
it
but there's-
does say
yeah.
there was a Big Bang, and they posit some form of a big crunch, and then there'll be
Yeah.
another Big Bang.
Yes, that's what I meant. Like infinity, we would keep on doing that same cycle over and over. Infinity in the back and then forward. Yeah. There's been infinite Big Bangs and infinite Big Crunches, and that's like one of the ways that Gaudapada shows the illusion of the Maya in the Mandukya, right?
Let's not go there tonight.
Okay, I'm sorry. My apologies.
No, it's okay. But the idea is that I want to stress with this is to not worry about what's going on in the now. Karma is the hand that we're dealt in life. Purushartha or self-effort is what we do with it. In the end, even our self-effort is all part of the divine plan. But we have it. All right, next verse.
Akhanda Anitya Advaya Bodha Shakya Spurantam Atmanaman Ananta Vaibhavam Samavranotya Priti Shaktiresha Tamo Mahi Rahurivar Kabimbam. Avriti, the veiling power, is of the nature of tamas, ignorance. It covers the self, whose glories are infinite, which is indivisible, eternal, and one without a second, just as Rahu covers the sun during a solar eclipse.
So here he calls it a vritti. It's also known as a varana shakti, same idea. It means covering or veiling power. And it's of the nature of tamas, delusion, illusion. It's the non-apprehension of myself. And the metaphor that he uses is Rahu, covering the sun. Rahu and Ketu in Vedic astrology are what we call the lunar nodes. Mythologically speaking, Rahu is a demon, and he's got an enormous mouth and a head, but he has no body. So as he's flying through the heavens and he gets to the sun, he gobbles up the sun. But thank God he has no body, because then it comes right out the other side of his head. We call this a solar eclipse. So when Rahu devours the sun, in fact, is the sun really touched in any way by the eclipse? No. All it is the shadow obscuring the sun. But the sun is not touched at all. Likewise, when a vritti, veiling power, covers the mind, in fact, the self is never touched. So, what is the nature of this avritti, this avarana shakti? It is the experience within the mind that I do not know who I am. Are you in light? No. Are you in bondage? Yes. Do you know the self? No. That's the experience of vritti, ignorance. And that's the first power of vritti, or of varana shakti. Shakti means power. Next verse.
Tiro bhute svatmanya malatarate jovati puman atmanam mohada hamiti shariram kalayati tatak kama krodha prabhriti bhiramum bandhana gunaihi param vikshepakya rajasa purushakti purushaktir yathayati. When a man's own self of purest splendor is hidden from his direct experience, that man, due to ignorance, comes to falsely identify himself with his body, which is the not self. Then the merciless persecution of Rajas, projecting power, binds him down with fetters of lust, anger, etc.
So, subsequent to ignorance, avritti, or avarana shakti, comes the projecting power, vikshepa shakti. Vikshepa comes from the root kshipati, which means to throw, or like hurl a spear. So it has lots of nuance, taste to it. The basic meaning is the mind projects the imagined world of name and form, and I take it as real. The other meaning of this Vikshepa Shakti, this projecting power, is the mind, as it were, leaves home, and I go, oh, I want, rather than the mind staying home and at peace. That mind leaving, going out with yearning. We learned a new word in Tripura Rahasya the past couple of weeks, vancha, wanting, kama, craving, spriha, longing, Krishna, thirsting. So many words in the literature. I must have it different than it is. That power we call Vikshepa Shakti. Now, this relationship between the veiling power and the projecting power gets very clear if we just go to the dream state. If you understand the dream state clearly, this becomes clear. So, what is the precondition to dreaming? It is, I fall asleep. Sleep can be defined as the non-apprehension of myself as the waker. My mind is covered by avritti, by tamas. The mind is in its unmanifest, pure, delicious, dark state. But then imagination happens, but in a very specific way. The mind projects the dream world. And in the dream world, the mind projects a dream body and then identifies with it. I become the dreamer ego inside the dream body, looking out of the dream body's eyes, hearing with the dream body's ears. And I see a dream world which I think is separate from me. And there are people who are other than me in the dream. And then I have wants and desires, anxieties and sorrows, joys and fears in the dream. To the dreamer ego, the dream world is just as real as this world is to the waker ego. And listen carefully. The phenomenon of being identified with the body of the waking state, looking out with the senses of the waking state body, seeing the waking state world with its joy-giving and misery-producing qualities is no different than the dream state. It comes about by first vritti, covering power. The non-apprehension of myself is that ground of being. Then imagination is taken as real. Now, imagination in and of itself is not problematic. Close your mind for a moment and visualize a strawberry. Now open your eyes. Any suffering there? Do you have any delusion that the strawberry you imagined is real? No. So the appearance of the world is not the problem. The problem is avarana shakti. I forget who I am. Vikshepa shakti. I think I'm a person. And the world is separate from me. Two-part process. Veiling power, projecting power. Sleep, dream. Varana Shakti or a Vritti, Vikshepa Shakti. How do I get rid of the dream? If I'm locked in an iron cage in the dream ego says, let me out of the cage. But how can you permanently get out of the cage? Wake up. So when the buddhi, subtle intellect, becomes buddha, awake, person of wisdom no longer takes the body, mind, intellect as themselves, nor do they take the phenomenal world as real and separate. Any thoughts about this? Next verse.
Mahamoha graha grasana kalitatma avagamano dhiyo nanavastham swayam abhinayam tadgunataya apare samsare vishapure jalanidhau nimajjonmadhayam bhramati kumatihi kutsit gatihi. An individual who has a perverted intellect, whose knowledge of his self has been swallowed by the shark of complete ignorance, behaves as though the different states of his intellect were the natures of the self, and drifts up and down, now rising and now sinking, on the ocean of change, which is full of the poison of sense pleasures. Indeed, what a calamitous fate!
Yes, yes. So as the result of the ignorance and the subsequent misapprehension, first is the non-apprehension of myself, and then there's the subsequent misapprehension. I think I'm my body, or my body plus my mind and intellect. As the intellect goes through its various states, I do not know that I am the witness of joy. I am the witness of sorrow. I am the witness of enthusiasm. I am the witness, etc. I think I am happy. I am sad. I am successful. I am a failure. I am okay. I am a piece of dog poop. I, fill in the blank, fill in the blank. That's the problem. Whatever state the mind is in, I want to try to fix it most of the time. So then I start playing whack-a-mole with the world to try to fix or modify painful mind states. That is my problem. My problem is adhyas, superimposition. I superimpose upon the self the qualities of the not self. I'm unable to discriminate between the self and the not self. I cannot see that the body and the feelings and the thoughts are anatma, not self. I think they are me. That's the root of the problem. Any thoughts on this? Now, this jiva bhavana, this feeling that I am a person, is almost like hypnotism. I mean, it's really powerful. It's like a trance state. And you can't see it come upon your mind. You can see it end. Just like nobody rolls the credits at the beginning of a dream. You never see a dream begin. You wake up and you know the dream is over. But when the dream has begun, part of its nature is it projects a cause and effect assumed past that makes perfect sense. We never question. Likewise, when we slip into egoism, into ignorance, it's a beginningless condition, meaning I never see it begin. So if I can never see it begin, how do I stop it? We have to remember, if I feel like a person, I'm deluded. If I feel like a person, I'm deluded. Give up trying to resolve the struggle of ego and instead get out. Drop the struggler. Over and over and over again. Now, initially we get glimpses of this in our meditation seat, but the real tapas takes place in the world. Why? Because that's where the triggers come from. That's where our reactivity shows up, where we are prone to get identified. Any thoughts on this?
Jim, this is David. What
Yes.
did you say? So the kind of the steps in that, if I feel like a person, I'm deluded. Then you said
Yes.
drop it, and then what was the after that?
Well, if you you come out of meditation, you're pretty clear. Oh yeah, I am that heartless Brahman. I am that ground of being. You're clear. And then something will happen and you'll get triggered or identified. And what you want to do is understand, oh, if I have a problem, if I, Jim, have a problem, I'm in delusion. Stop. Who is it who's upset? Oh, that's just the mind. Who am I? Oh, I am that Brahman. And you just drop the whole mess.
So
Once you get that,
re-identify.
yes, re-identify with the self over and over and over again.
And that those kind of jiva bhavana thoughts are, you're saying, like, that's the red flag. If those, when you notice those come up,
You know that's where a particular vasana has arisen. What's the power of a vasana? The first power of a vasana is that it robs us of self-experience. Its nature is to rob us of self-experience. How do I know that vasana is operative in my mind? I feel like a person. Don't try to be a better person. Get out. And it seems like trying to empty the ocean with a teaspoon. But keep at it.
Jim? Maybe one more question.
Yes.
Hi, this is Vladimir. So just if you could help explain if there is a feeling of I like something or I don't like something. It could be, you know, how the tree looks, or it could be some food, doesn't matter. But just that liking or disliking, is it ever coming from the self, or is it always the combination of vasanas?
It is always in the mind. Always.
So self would essentially never have any attitude to any of that as liking, disliking.
Self is just witnessing awareness without qualities, without characteristics, without movement.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Nothing. Shunyata. It's empty.
Thank you.
And I can prove it to you. So name something you like.
Tennis.
Okay. Are you aware that you like tennis?
I am.
How can it be you?
There you go.
See what I mean?
Yes.
Think the thought, I love tennis.
I see.
See, you're aware of it. You're aware of the feeling, you're aware of the thought, you're aware of the endorphins in the body, all of it. You're aware of it.
Thank you.
No, excellent question. You're getting the sense of the practice. Very good. Very good. All right. Any more on this particular verse?
Hey, Jim, a comment or a question. Is it possible to be self-aware of the awareness?
Is it possible to be self-aware of the awareness? That is a fabulous question. And I'm going to take a little bit of a detour from the scripture because you brought it up. Everything in the world is known by what we call the triputi, the triple factor. There is a knower, there is knowing, and there's the known. That's how Swamiji used to do it. So, for example, water glass. I am the knower. Seeing is the means of knowledge. Water glass, object of knowledge. Triple factor. Knower, knowing, and know. You understand how that works? Get
Yes.
it? Okay. So you can go through all the 5 senses. Anything seen, tasted, touched, heard, or smelled. There's the knower. There's some means of knowledge, one of the senses. There's an object of knowledge in the world. We can go to a more subtle experience, the realm of feelings. I am the knower. Manas, or mind, is the means of knowledge. A feeling is the object of knowledge. I know joy. I know sorrow, etc. You see that?
Yes. Yes.
Now let's go more subtle to the realm of thought. The means of knowledge for knowing thoughts is the intellect, buddhi. Think the problem 2 + 2. Visualize a strawberry. Remember what you had for lunch. That place is your intellect, but you still have the same triple factor. I am the knower. Buddhi is the means of knowledge. Thoughts, images, memories are the objects of knowledge. You got it?
Yes.
Are you you? Are you? Are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Are you you? Aren't you?
Yes.
How do you know it? Do you see, hear, taste, touch, or smell? I. Do you emote? I. Do you think? I.
No.
Are you you? Do you know it?
That's the self-awareness. Got it.
How do you know you? The self is self-evident. The self does not have the triple factor. The knower, the knowing, and that which is known are all one. But you never know yourself as an object. You'll never be in meditation and you'll be going, Om Namah Shivaya. Oh, there it went by. I saw it. No, it'll never happen. Because whatever went by, who saw it? You did.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, the self must be unknowable then. No. Do you exist? Yeah. How do you know? I don't know. I just am. Yeah.
Can I say something really quick?
Thank you.
Jim?
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. It just reminded me of what we talked about last time, that every experience we have is what validates our being. You know, it's the experiences in themselves that validate who we are. And that
But
is
we
how
don't
we
need
prove
to
who we
pay
are.
attention to the experience.
No, I understand, but
What you
they
wanna do is
themselves validate our being. Yeah.
You want to pay attention to by whom, by what is every experience known. And we have these words, Swayambhu is one of the Sanskrit words, which means self-evident. Another one is Swayam Jyoti, which means self-luminous. The self is, as it were, the light that illumines all objective phenomena. But itself needs no other light to see it. There's not consciousness one that's going to be aware of consciousness two. It's simple. How do you know you are you? Now, no photo, no image came up. Who was it who asked that question?
Nikki.
Hi, Nikki. Very
Hi,
good
yes.
question. Does that make it a little clearer?
Yes, much more clear. Thank you.
Any others on this? All right, next verse.
Bhanuprabha Sanjanita Bhrapankti Bhanum Tirodhaya Vijrambhathe Yatha Atmoditaham Atmodita Ahankritirātmā Tattvam Tatha Tirodhaya Vijrambhathe Swayam. As the formations of clouds generated by the sun's rays come to veil the very same sun and appear clearly manifest in the sun, so too the ego arisen from the self covers the reality of the self and expresses itself in full manifestation.
So this is one of my favorite images that Shankara has. So here we are in the city. In the city, we have a lot of what we call ambient light. You know, there's a lot of light that comes from the city. So you can look up in the sky and you may not be able to see the starry night. So at night, if the sky is overcast or the sky is clear, it's not as evident in the city. You go out in the country, and if it's a clear sky, oh my God, look at the stars. You can see the Milky Way. City is hard. So at night, whether or not it's overcast is not evident. But in the daytime, I can go out here in Oakland and the sky is overcast. And I can go, oh, it's going to be a gloomy day. You look up and you cannot see the sun. No, there's no sun today. It's an overcast sky. And I can ask someone, do you see the sun? It's hard to tell what time of the day it is because it's overcast. Oh, yes, yes, yes. Now, how do I know that it's overcast? Well, it's daytime, meaning it is the very light of the sun that illumines the overcast clouds, by which the sun is obscured from my vision. Whereas at night, if it's overcast, I can't see them. So someone comes to me, oh, Jim, I really want to study yoga. I'm in such bondage. I want to realize the self. Oh, that's very good, very good. So you have a rough life right now. Oh, yes, I'm being roasted in the fires of change. Oh, do you know that you are miserable? Oh, yes, I know I am miserable. Okay. Are you enlightened yet? Oh, God, no, 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 no. I'm just a miserable worm caught up in ignorance. Oh, do you know that you are ignorant? Oh, yes, oh, yes. I'm just a humble person just beginning. I'm just a worm. Now listen to what the person is saying. I know my ignorance. I know my misery. I know my suffering. By the way, do you exist? Oh, yes, my existence is miserable. But do you exist? Oh, yes, I exist. But my existence is miserable. I am miserable. What they're really saying is, I know misery. So listen very carefully. Just as the overcast clouds never, in fact, cover the sun. It just obscures the sun's orb from my vision down here on the planet. And in fact, it's the very light of the sun by which I can see the clouds. Likewise, the mind in ignorance causes the mind to be confused. The nature of the self is obscured from the mind. In fact, in the depths of suffering, in the depths of ignorance, in the depths of misery, everybody still knows I am. I shine. They never lose that. So, Yoga Vasishta says, both bondage and liberation occur to the mind. Technically, it's the subtle intellect. The self is ever free. There is no other bondage than the deeply rooted conviction in the subtle intellect, I'm bound. Meaning, I think I'm my body, or my body plus all the nonsense of the personality. There is no other liberation than the deeply rooted conviction, which comes about because of direct experience. Not that I'm an enlightened person, but I'm not a person at all. I am Brahman. I am the self. I am that ground of being that's never been touched by any of it. It is the Buddhi that becomes Buddha. And none of that touches the self, which is ever free. Don't believe me. Don't believe Shankara. Look. In a quiet mind, or as he said in several verses ago, in a well-regulated mind full of sattva. Introvert the attentive faculty. In the space between your thoughts. See if you can notice, apprehend, infer, intuit. Words fall short. Who knows the thoughts and the space between the thoughts? Koham, who am I? You see, there's nothing there. Yet, that no thing shines. It's pure awareness. As sentience, I am a conscious being. The conscious being. Without qualities, without characteristics, without taint, without dirt, beyond the mind. No edges, no boundaries, a shoreless ocean. Absolute stillness. Aham Brahmasmi. I am that partless Brahman. All right, we'll stop here. What's the verse we're on tonight, and what will we start with next week?
We are going to do 143 next week.
143. Okay, we have time for a few more questions. No questions? Come on.
Well, I guess I'm struggling with not being my body and not being my ego.
Yes.
Just with my current experiences. It brings me back to just, validating that misery again, which I lived in for so long. But I don't know, I'm very egotistical because I still want to be some important being, and that is my problem. And it's all about my body and my mind, and not my Atman. But I don't know. I'm not where you are. I'm a little more confused.
Who is it who's not where someone else is?
Well, I understand what you're saying. I'm talking about mentally. I don't know. Sorry.
I get it.
I'm not
And
trying,
what
I'm not
you
trying to be a
need
dick.
to do,
Yeah.
what you need to do is, who is it who's concerned about being egotistical or not egotistical?
Let it go, I guess. But
Yes.
yeah, it's hard. I don't know. It's hard for me. I don't know. It's hard for me.
Of course it is.
Sorry.
No? Who's sorry? Drop it.
Okay.
Drop it all, Justin. You can do this.
Yeah.
Let it all go. And that means all the stories, all the things your mind has told you about who you've been, what your qualities, characteristics are, drop it all. You can do this. I have faith in you. And of course it's hard. Any other thoughts or questions? All right, let's sit for a bit then.
Yes. Good night. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Deepa and Ganesh.
Thank you, Jim. Good night.
Good night.